Okay, we're going to get started. I'm awfully glad that you came out this evening. My name's Joe Geiger. I'm the Director of Archives and History. This is actually Archives Month, and we have a proclamation over here that the Governor issued proclaiming this National Archives Month. And we have a lot of things going on in our library. A couple things I should note before we even get started. The Salt Festival, of course, gets started, I think, tomorrow. We did, as part of that, we set up these two cases with materials, records, documents from our collections, actually going back to 1810 when they were first getting into it, right up here in these cases. So if you've got a second before you leave, take a peek at those if they're of interest to you. This is a lecture series that we do. We usually have one or two lectures per month, and we started a new thing, where we're trying to start a new thing, where we have YouTube videos from the National Archives about some subject matter, and then staff will discuss that. And we have two of those that we're doing this month. October 12th, documenting death in the Civil War, and then October 19th, Civil War medicine and surgery. And again, all these things happen on Thursday evenings. We also have next Friday and Saturday, we will be having training workshops. There's actually a place in Philadelphia, the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts are going to hold training workshops here on essential policies and procedures for cultural collections and risk assessments for cultural institutions. That sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it? So we have that, and then next, the following Saturday, that would be let's see, 5th, 7th, 21st, the annual meeting of the Mining Your History Foundation will take place here, and they'll have some good speakers and so on. So anyway, a lot of different events that we have here, and certainly I'd like to invite you back to lectures we have in the future. But we have an outstanding guest this evening. We're really, really happy to have Jesse Skiles with us. Jesse is a native of Kanawha County. Of course, most of you know Jesse, so I don't have to tell you this. But he's a direct descendant of one of Charleston's oldest families. He graduated from DuPont in 1982, where he played football, and then went on to a college track career at Glenville State College. And he has coached track and cross country for more than 30 years. He became the head coach at Gilmer County High School and at Glenville State College, which was his alma mater. And he was a grad assistant at Marshall before being hired at head coach at Wesleyan University. And he completed his 26th year. That's a remarkable record. 26 years as track coach. He still serves as the cross country coach and still in season. I guess you're in season at this time. His teams have won 63 conference championships. That's pretty remarkable. And he has been named League Coach of the Year a record 52 times. He also, while coaching, he's also worked as a writer for the Clarksburg Exponent Telegram. In 2005, he published Mountaineer Dreams, and he has written statistical histories on Richwood basketball, Woodrow Wilson basketball, Mullins basketball, all great programs, Franklin basketball, and DuPont basketball. And of course, tonight he's here to discuss a topic I'm looking forward to hearing about, DuPont Football History. So please join me in welcoming Jesse Skiles.
Everybody hear me all right? Well, I'm used to when I'm speaking to my team, I'm not really a podium guy. I'm kind of like a preacher. I like to maneuver around and say my piece. But first off, got some members of my team here. Thank you all for making the trip from Buchanan. We've got, this project was about 3 years in the making, and I want to, talk some about the research, and before I tell the story, but to provide some thank yous up front. And when I first, the idea first sprang in my mind when there was an alumni game in September of 2000, maybe in August of 2013. For the first game, Tyrone Pierce called me up and it asked me, if any of the older guys might want to play. And I'm like, I'm 50 years old, man, But anyway, I got to play with some of my old teammates, Gene Williams, Larry Halstead, Jerry Rumberg. Mike Hodge was a friend of mine, one of my teammates that lives up in Bridgeport. And we agreed to do it. We carpooled coming down. And my sister's back here. She was involved in the planning with that. And I think she's walking the baby. Huh? But anyway, we came and played in. There were 3,500 people came in the crowd that night, and it just the memories, how it all came back. I'm like, this is worth being preserved. This story needs told. This is something that is special, and the school had been out for 15 years. But the thing about Mike, and it's funnier when he tells this story, but he's a year older than me. He was 51. I was 50 when we played in this game. And we thought, well, we're the old guys. We're going to play about 9 or 10 plays, make an appearance. We get out there and start. We only had 20 guys. Maurice Samuel pulled his calf. Then Alan Berry pulled his bicep. And then Mike Wilkerson broke his leg. Next thing I know, we played the whole second half. And it was a blast. And we were involved in the game and boom. And we were driving back and we were like, man, that was awesome. And, we got to Flatwoods and made a stop at, we had to have some Gatorade. And we stopped at Go-Mart, and then we tried to get out of the truck. And we're like, man, that may not have been a good idea. It was like we couldn't hardly get out of the truck. But it was a great memory, and that was the impetus for doing this. And then that summer, early that summer, I was able to contact Sue and Jim Chase, and we were able to have an evening and talked about getting the project going, and they let me use some of the old yearbooks of her father, who I'm going to talk a lot about here down the road in the talk, and that got me going. Rob Ryan has a museum that rivals any Hall of Fame, and he does an amazing job with our Alumni Association, has really kept the DuPont spirit alive, and got me going. A good buddy of mine, Steve Keenan, who is with the Montgomery Herald, has done a lot of work covering up in that end, and he provided a lot of stuff. Doug Huff with the Wheeling Intelligencer is a historian, and I'm going to mention Rick Baker, but I'm going to really give a shout out to the folks in this library. I mean, that room back there is my sanctuary. Whenever I am no longer coaching, I want to come here and spend my days here researching, get a little run on the boulevard, and that to be the next life, and really try to preserve a lot of the history of the valley. I'm working on some other projects for DuPont right now, but the people here are amazing, and I cannot thank them enough for all the help. And the book, it ended up being 3 years worth of work. It's 360 pages, and those other statistical histories were good histories for the communities, and they were bound. But this is an actual publication through Bookmasters, and it was a lot went into it, especially coaching these guys. A lot goes into that. We had 153 kids on the team last year. That was a lot. And sometimes one of them's having. Most of y'all didn't have grade problems, but there's stuff you got to worry about. But we were able to carve out pockets of time where I could come down and do some work for an hour. But this every newspaper, everything's back here, and we were able to dive into it. The story. First off, I'm going to talk about DuPont, that end of the valley. I am fiercely proud to be from the eastern end of the Kanawha Valley, of the culture, and this is not just a football story. It's about community, it's about culture, and about people. And another big inspiration in that part of the story, before there was ever sports, before there was schools, being developed in that side of the county, the salt industry, the salt works, how it tied to everything, salt to the mines began to grow, and I got a classmate, a buddy of mine who I graduated with in 1982, who is one of the great historians in this valley. He's published a couple books, the Camel's Creek, a coal mining community, Mr. Todd Hansen. We graduated together in 1982, and he's back here, made the trip in from Jackson County here. I'm going to give him a shout out because the beginning of this story is everything is tied to what he researched and what he put out. Because without that, the schools developed from the coal industry and the coal camps and all up Camel's Creek. There was, You know, my mom, Lona Skiles, went to 8 Mile School, went to Midway Junior High. My cousin Johnny here, his mom Madeline, same deal. He brought the train all the way down there. And both of my grandfathers, Ted White and Jesse Skiles, the real Jesse Skiles there, both worked in the coal mines. My papa, Jesse Fountain, up in Putney, and Ted, Papa White, up at Simcoe. And that is how the schools came to be up through there, and all the way up through there. Cabin Creek, up Kelly's Creek, Ward was a big community, had their own junior high up there. But from that spawned Malden High School, Malden District High School, which did not have sports when it began, when it popped up, and they were in the 20s. They had some small classes, but they did not have athletics at the time. So there were some athletic programs in the valley. Charleston High had some big teams in the 1900s, 10s. Guy Rocco Gorman came in 1913 as a head coach. Charleston Catholic had some early teams. It was called Sacred Heart at the time. East Bank was not called East Bank. It was Cabin Creek District High School at the time. Well, Charleston High kind of ran the roost here. It was a large school. The school that the old Charleston High that I had a lot of family go to down here as well was down here on Washington Street. Was built in 1926. The previous school was what was the old Thomas Jefferson Junior High, was the old Charleston High. But when that was built, eventually that school had over 3,000 students. So you know, that was a big school, Huntington, and you have to understand the way football, high school football at that time, was such a big deal. There was no cable, you know, it wasn't TV, you know. But Charleston High, when they would play Huntington High, there would be 16,000 people at Fairfield Stadium. Laidley Field, there'd be 10,000 people. You had to get your tickets in August if you're going to go to one of those games. Several radio broadcasts, there'd be a parade, caravans going to each town. And so there was the big time high school football from a small city schools as they were. Cabin Creek became a big rival towards Charleston in 1923. They hired a Wesleyan grad, Buchanan guy up there, M.T. Hick Hamrick. And he had a run from 1923 to 1932. In those 10 years, 8 of the years, he only had one loss. I'm going to use Rick Baker as my source here. He's got a database with all the coaching records. 8 years, he only had one loss. 2 years, he had 2. 1 year, he had 3. And ran the table. And then he left in 32 to go to Calhoun County High. But during that period, Malden made the move to start football. And they were looking to you know, bring in somebody as an athletic director and a coach and teacher. And the guy that they hired was the godfather of football in our area up here, a guy by the name of Harry Douglas, and his daughter, Sue, right here. And I'll give you some background on Coach Douglas. He was from Elkins, which is from up where he played at Davis and Elkins College, played for the name Cam Henderson. So some of you guys that are Marshall fans, Coach Henderson has a big connection to Glenville. So, you know, he's buried at Glenville. He went to Glenville, played there, was one of our alums up there. So we knew the name there. But he coached at D&E, then went to Marshall, and the Henderson Center is named after him down there, where Marshall plays their home basketball games right now. But Coach Douglas played for Henderson, and Coach Douglas was teammates with 2 future NFL players. There were some great D&E teams. Tex Irvin and Red Corzine were a couple of the players there in the 20s. But he left, when he graduated up there, his first teaching and coaching job was at Oceana. And they say that's when your mom and dad got married. Do you want to speak to that about when they first went down there?
1929 is when my dad graduated from Davis and Elkins and went to Oceana and started sports in Oceana. They had no school colors, no mascot or anything, so since he had graduated from D&E, he named the teams the Hurricanes and used red and white, which were the colors of D&E. And he was there alone in 1929 starting sports. He married my mother in 1930 and moved her down to Oceana, and they lived in a boarding house with no running water, and they showered in the gym at Oceana High School, so she must have loved him to stay. And the people in that area were very gracious to them because they were doing something for the community, and it was great excitement. Then the next year he moved to Malden.
And before he came, well, when he went to Oceana, he really didn't have a lot of familiarity with the southern part of the state. So he was going into a new area. But when he came to Malden, we were looking at, and Rob had hooked me up with some of those old yearbooks on his site. And a lot of those years, they had 25 graduates maybe. I mean, it was a tiny school. But he got in there, and a big part of the issue was, they didn't have a budget. They didn't have any money. And he did everything from a shoestring start here. They didn't have a field. They didn't have a gym. So they played their basketball games down at Roosevelt Junior High. That's where the home basketball games were played. Didn't have a football field. So they created one out there in the Dickinson Field. It was called Levi Field, but for you folks familiar by the S-turn, right there below the hey ladies, there's more of my folks. There was below the greenhouse right there. That's where the stadium was at Malden at the time. And so they began playing in 1931. They didn't have uniforms, and they didn't have money for uniforms. So the connection there came with Gorman was no longer the coach at Charleston High, but was the athletic director. And the new coach was Albert Big Sleepy Glenn, who was a big star at WVU, but the connection was he was teammates with Coach Douglas at Elkins High School. He was an Elkins native, and he was here, and so he got with him. We didn't have uniforms. He said, you know what, we've got these old practice uniforms that they had discarded. They didn't have Charleston High was going to get rid of them. They donated them to Malden, and that's how DuPont became blue and gold. We had Charleston High's practice uniforms, and we played our games in Charleston High's practice uniforms, and it was the Malden Panthers. And that first year, we didn't have any feeder team. Those guys hadn't played football. They won one game, and by the third year, Coach Douglas had got the team. They were rolling. They were undefeated, and they had the first big game on that end of the valley. We brought Sacred Heart. Charleston Catholic was undefeated. It was called Sacred Heart. It was, the papers talk about being the biggest crowd in the game on that end of the valley at the time. Catholic beat us 7-6, but it was a great game. We went on to go 9-1. Catholic was 9-1, and it came to where Charleston High they were looking to get a challenge game for a state championship so they could be declared the state champs by the State Sports Writers Association. And it was a big controversy within the county, whether it was going to be Charleston Catholic or whether it was going to be Malden. And Coach Glenn issued the challenge to Malden. And so we ended up getting the game. Coach Douglas, in an interview with Keith Walters in 1972, it was one of the articles that we have attached in the book. He said he knew we couldn't beat them. Said by that time there was no GW, there was no Stonewall yet. There were over 3,000 students in Charleston High. And here we had, like I said, we're graduating about 25 a year. And they beat us. But the significance of that is we split the gate in this championship. And I'm talking about Coach Douglas, the businessman here. We were able to get the revenue to push the program forward. I'll tell you where we only had one football. We only had one football. And we practiced with, it was the game ball. We traveled with it, practiced with it. We had one football. That was it. There wasn't one guy down there kicking. We're down here going. We had one ball. Like we're playing with the discarded uniforms. The goalposts were not metal. Coach Douglas knew a guy that in the lumber business up there, and they had wooden goalposts. Come out with a post hole digger. They had the wooden goalposts, and that was our goalpost for the year. And at the end of the year, they tore it down for firewood. Tore it down, did it again the next year. That was our goalpost. But in 1934, the year after that championship game, was the first time Coach Douglas had money, and from that revenue, they bought uniforms. They had Malden uniforms, and you know what? They had a ball they could practice with and a different ball for the game ball. Finally, the fourth year of the program. But they were able to go forward with that, and then they had several winning seasons down the road. Had an 8-1 year, an 8-2 year, and they're rolling. And then when the DuPont Plant came into 1925, there were several entities that helped create what became DuPont High School. But Coach Douglas was the impetus to what happened there, about moving it forward. And as far as meeting with the school administrators, with getting with the administration at the DuPont Plant, and they had a vested interest as well in that they wanted the school closer to the plant for all their employees that had kids going to Malden District or having to go to East Bank. They wanted their own school right there. The area that is DuPont City right now, that was not called DuPont. It was a slang name for it at the time because it was just a community where a lot of the DuPont employees' families, and in that field, that's where it was built. And in 1939, the very first year of the school was in 1939. My daughter, Mickey Jo's back here with me. She went with me. There was a man by the name of Bill Gardner, who was a longtime teacher, and he was on that first team. And Mickey and I got to spend some time with him one day. There's a picture of us together in the book. And it was just a treasure of knowledge. What he had told us about Coach Douglas, what he had told us about that first team. The field was just a pile of rocks. There was no grass. And, you know, they referred to it as the rock pile. They were practicing it. And they became the junior high field, the high school field. But that first team, when it all came going, I want to talk more about Coach Douglas because I'm going to talk about Coach Griffith here later in some similar light. Was not just a football coach, but was a tremendous musician. He was in charge of the string band there. It was important to him that the kids be engaged and involved in the school. And music was a big part of his life. And the school was just very vibrant because of his involvement, and was a big spearheading what moved forward. But we went in 1941. We had a one-loss team. 1943, another big team. We had our first All-Stater, a guy by the name of Tony Marshall. Is Tony still with us? So he's up in his 90s now, and his son was John Marshall, who was with our choir, I believe, when we were in high school. And is he with the Charleston Symphony now, John? Charleston Light Opera Guild, and tremendous talent. And but Tony, I guess, was one of the phenomenal athletes. It was our first All-Stater. What he did in 1943, we didn't have lights, no lights at the field. We were raising money for the lights as we went. Games were played on Friday afternoon. 1946, significant year in our history, in that we didn't have a junior high program, didn't have a feeder, and Coach Douglas noted a lot of these other teams had junior highs coming in, and a lot of the players he'd had up until that point did not play organized football till they were in ninth grade. So he went out, again, there wasn't a stipend, he needed to find a coach. And he probably pulled the coup. He went out, Coach Hamrick, he was retired. He'd been at East Bank, and he may have been close to 70 at that time. So you had him in class, right? Y'all had him in class. I don't know what kind of conversation or how he enticed him out of it, but he pulled him out of retirement to come back and be the junior high coach and to be an assistant with the high school and to come back. And he came out and the junior high from 1946 right up until the very end. John, you were head coach there for many years. That was a tremendous part of the success of the high school that we had there. 47, we had our first conference scoring champion, Dick Casebolt. That team had Wes Bitzer, Dale Kelly, amazing group of athletes there at that time. 1950, Danny Williams was the star fullback on that team. And he ended up starring at WVU, scored the first touchdown in the Sugar Bowl when we played against Georgia Tech in the 1954 Sugar Bowl. 1951 was not one of our better teams. It was a rebuilding year, and we had a big sophomore named Jimmy Lett on that team, Tom Stanford fullback. But the significance of that year was one of the great upsets that the school ever pulled. Dunbar was 7-0. They were number one in the state. They were heading Coach Romanowski, who went on to be the track coach at WVU. But we were 2-5, playing a lot of young kids, and I think Jim's heard these stories here. But Dunbar was one of the groups that were making fun of our field. They didn't want to get any of their stars hurt. They didn't want to come to our field. Anyway, so angered Coach Douglas, angered him. They were talking about our field here. Well, when they were done with their pregame warm-up, did their warm-up, they scattered, and they all went to pick up rocks and toss them off the field to make fun of our field, which really incited them. Our guys came out. It was one of the great upsets in the history of the school. We beat Dunbar 14-13 that night, knocked them out of the playoffs. We had lights now. We got lights in 1948. That was one of the Friday night lights games there in 1951. Huge upset, knocked them down, and we carried that on. 1957, did the same thing to an undefeated St. Albans team. Bill Dornick, the guy that scored that winning touchdown. I've had some great conversations with Bill. He likes riding his Harley all over the country. He's up at Parkersburg. His son wrestled, was a state champ at Parkersburg South. But, we had pulled a big upset there. Along the way there, we had a couple key things happen here, mid-50s. Everything on that end of the valley above us, beyond us, up beyond the plant, which got beyond Shrewsbury, Shillian, everybody went to East Bank. Cedar Grove High School was created in the fall of 1955. The kids who were at East Bank were grandfathered in. A lot of people don't know this, but 4 of the 5 starters, when Jerry West won the state title in '56, were on our end of the river. If Hobo Acres was one of the starters, there's a lot of, Acres connection with the DuPont side, was one of the starters with that East Bank team. The other part of that was integration. The law was passed, with the man, as far as and we had a lot of stars from our end of the valley that were going to the all-black high schools, either up at Washington, up at London, or down here at Garnet. And you have to think about a different time in life there, where all of a sudden, we're going to integrate, and it was almost like today's way some of the high school coaches are today with recruiting, going after all these athletes. And I got to interview Bill Harmon up in Rand, who I graduated with his daughter. And I'm going to really give some props here for Coach Douglas, and Coach Balsey was his assistant at the time, with the class and just how they went about getting DuPont integrated. Because everybody was just going after the athletes, and Coach Douglas would actually get permission from Garnet to talk to certain athletes, and he would actually go in and talk to the families. They went to the house and would talk to them about their vision of an integrated DuPont High and how they would be accepted into our program. And the first 3 athletes we had was Michi Robinson, who's very good friends with you all, Wendell Hotnett, and Eugene Harmon, who was Bill's younger brother. Bill only had 1 more year. He chose to stay. At Garnet. He was finishing up. But Eugene came, and he had a lineman's number, but he wore the number in honor of his brother. And he ended up, and we were trying to sort all that out. I'll see you, John.
Hi, Jesse. How are you?
I got you, man.
Buddy.
That's my cousin, John. So we were, trying to, when I was doing the book, about giving credit to who the first African-American player was at DuPont. And Michi, may have been in some special teams, but Harmon was the first athlete that appeared on a stat sheet, that scored a touchdown, and appeared in the starting lineup, and I credited him with being the first African-American player at DuPont. And obviously, integration, spread through the county, ended up being it was time. It was time for America, and it was definitely time, for us here in the county. But the first African-American superstar, Chauncey Robinson. If he got to the corner, it was over, right? He was state champ in the 100, fastest guy in the state, was one of our guys here at DuPont. At 59 team, Butch Myers, Dale Gwynn, Burt Mac Rogers was the year behind that group, but he was with that group. Amazing athletes. They didn't quite make it to the States all the way. They had some, but it was one of the great teams. 3 Division I players. Butch and Chauncey went to Hawaii. Burt Mack, who was the first state wrestling champion that we had, went to Virginia Tech. They were all on that team. One of the significant issues of that was the East Bank DuPont rivalry came to an end. And I've got differing, I've heard so many stories about the way this went down. But in 1959, this is a story I got. The East Bank side, the fans, the bench, was taunting Chauncey incessantly from the beginning. They were on him. They were on him. They were talking smack, a lot of it clean, a lot of it with a little bit of racial overtones. They were on him, and finally, Chauncey, he wasn't taking anymore. Fired a punch. Got in a little scrap. He got ejected. The East Bank guy got ejected. There's still about 8 minutes left in the game. East Bank's putting it on us. We're about down 27-6, and they're just going to run the ball out. They're towards the end of the game, about 4 minutes left. They throw a pass. They're going to rub it in. They're going to rub it in at our place. Guy catches it. He's going down the sideline. One of our guys on the bench, Cotton Hunter, came off the bench and just clotheslined the guy. Hooked him, knocked him down. Both sides cleared. Brawl, all out brawl. Coach Boston couldn't stop it. So, and that was it. There had to be a police escort back to East Bank that night. Game was shut down short. Board of Education said, it's not happening anymore. You're not playing. And they did not play again for 18 years. You never played East Bank, did you, Mr. Gregg? No, never happened. Rob never played East Bank. Didn't happen for 18 years. But at that time, Coach Douglas had stepped down, had gotten into administration, and Coach Balsey came on in 57, was one of Coach Douglas's assistants, a military guy, had played at Catholic, had played at Morris Harvey, where it was kind of had a history as a disciplinarian. We had some teams in the early 60s. I think Mr. Gregg was part of that team that my father-in-law there, Stanley Hancock, caught the triple reverse pass that tied Stonewall in 62 from Glenn Booker. They had a big star, Ricky Harris, was a sprinter there as a receiver, wide out, put up some big numbers. The golden age that came there for Coach Balsey was when Jim Fout came as a quarterback in 66, 67. Had some great receivers, Roger Shin, Fred Myers, Roland Willis. I think John Elliott was a big lineman on that team. And in 68, they also went 8-2. Those 2 years, we were undefeated. I think you were in junior high then, maybe when we run. Yep, I think you had moved here at that time. We were undefeated. St. Albans was undefeated. They were coming to our place, and the game was moved to Laidley Field instead of them coming to our place. Just they moved it to a different night because it would sell out, make money, and they were televised. Those games were televised, and we lost them. We lost those games both years, and but anyway, it was good money makers. We just missed the playoffs, and then the second golden age came when we moved to the new field, which was down on the river, and it was named Harry Douglas Field. It was named in his honor, and everybody that played down there, that was legendary because we were right on the river. It always seemed like that fog would roll in there at night, and it was amazing, and I think Rob was part of that here. We had 71, we went 7-2-1 when you were a sophomore. In 72, we went 11-1. Got beat by Bridgeport in the state championship game. And that night, or that game, you all had 17 first downs and they had 6. I was 8 years old. I was still crying about midnight that night. I couldn't believe we lost it, that group. Had Rob Ryan was our center. We had Bob Casebolt, one of our family members there, was fullback and linebacker. Danny Williams was an amazing quarterback, dynamic. Keith Hager. The semifinal game with Bluefield that year, still the greatest football game I've seen. Any level, 34-32, double overtime. What do you remember about that game, Rob?
David it was just an amazing game. It seemed like it was never end. But, you know, Danny was hurt. He had taken a shot in the kidneys in the game prior to that. I remember we had to go out and circle up on the field in our uniforms and put Danny in the middle, and they actually had to pull his pants down and do a examination on him before they let him play. But it was just an amazing game.
It was the first overtime game in the state, wasn't it?
Yep.
It was, yeah,
Yeah.
double overtime. Keith Hager.
4 touchdown catches.
amazing.
Keith Hager caught 4. That record still stands, you know, with you know, for us.
They had a boy named Gary Beaver that was amazing. But we got done.
That was one of the great thrills. I mean, like I said, it was a great. It went to double overtime, amazing plays. We were up and down. Old Laidley Field was a tremendous setting to watch football. Yeah, it was brilliant. 73 went 9-1. They only took 4 teams to playoffs. We ended up just on the outside looking in. Coach Bossy retired at that time. Then Corky Griffith. If Corky was here, we could get him telling some stories. But he came on, was a tremendous, yeah, we want to get here by midnight. But tremendous offensive mind, and that, I mean, it was electric. It took off. Jeff Brownlow, Jeff Wentz, Mike Williams, a big offensive line. We went 11-1, lost in the state championship game in 76, lost in the state championship game in 78. That group had Denny Ballard, who played at Pitt, Eddie Saunders, who was state champ in the 100, was a state record holder at that time, broke the state record in the 100. Mater, phenomenal O-lineman, Chris Myers, Tommy Spurlock, receiver. I mean, I could go on and on. It was Mark Shannon, the quarterback of that group. It was amazing to watch. And I tell you, Tim Ray Gardner, oh God, you know, the linebacker in nose guard. He ended up being in Corky put him at nose guard. But you know, we were in junior high. We went 8-0 at the junior high in '78, and we would see those guys. We'd go there in the weight room, and they were like Greek gods, you know, because you'd see them, and we were just, you know, it was unreal. And you know, they ended up being, you know, they were friends and they were mentors and helped us when we became when we got to high school. But Tim Ray, it was funny because, you know, I saw him last summer. He said, you know, what you were saying about that, he goes, when I saw Rob Ryan and Bob Casebolt and Steve Ballard, those guys, he goes, that's what I thought. He goes, they were like Greek gods. And like, he said he would see Casebolt down at Earl Cochran's gym, and he was like scared to even speak to him, you know, and they ended up being good friends. But that's a big part of our history. But yeah, I played 79 to 81, played corner and receiver, and played for Corky, and we went 8-2 in 1981. And I will say that was Corky's greatest coaching job, because we did not have the talent or the size of those teams, and we went 8-2. We shared the county championship with Charleston High. We beat Stonewall. Stonewall beat Charleston. Charleston beat us. We were all 7-1 in the county, but we only gave up 72 points in 10 games, and I am so proud of that defense. So proud, because Keith Richmond, Dennis Lucas, we had some guys that, like I said, we weren't loaded with talent, but we loved to hit people. Dennis's son, I think he rushed for over like 2,400 yards down at Buffalo a couple of years ago. And I know he was, you know, we were one of the schools that was recruiting him, and whenever we get together, he says, man, wouldn't you like to go just drill somebody? Yeah, man. You know, but that whole gang, man, it's like that was the mindset. And but Corky left after 82. My position coach, Dick Whitman, became the head coach. And I think Jacob, you and Tanner have heard a lot about Coach Whitman, right? He was there 83 to 98, and then he became the head coach when it consolidated in Riverside. Had an amazing run. You got Corey Skidmore. I'm going to make your dad. Your dad is he's on the back cover here. Was our defensive coordinator. Was the defensive coordinator for Corky and for Coach Whitman. tremendous coach. He was there with Bossy as well. And talking about, what we did with those defenses during that time, Whitman carried on those philosophies. And we had playoff teams, 86, 87, 88. Had a guy named Bubby Dent, who was another track champion, state track record holder, who's still, Bubby, don't you, Britt? Yep, he was a tight end and a defensive end there at 83 and 84 on a team that was 7-3. But we couldn't quite pull it off. Couldn't quite pull it off those 3 years. Some amazing teams. But Corey was playing at Charleston High. Kicked the field goal, what knocked us out in 87. Give you props, it happened. And you said, Karma, a couple of years ago, you broke the ankle on that foot that you did the kick and beat us, right?
Sure did.
Oh, God, that's, I tell you. No, that was, like I said, that hurt, but, where you were just a little fella, back when we were playing, if we had to lose, I'm glad you were the guy that did it. You were the guy that did it there. So.
Ricky did that too, don't you?
What's that?
Rick Whitman did it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Coach Whitman's son beat us up through 3 touchdown passes up at our place. Yep, that happened. But we had those teams when your time in the 80s, got to the early 90s, and that's when, the championships came. We had Eric Moss and Brian Bowe there, 80, 90, 91. And Bowe's older brother was the receiver when Tyrone and David run. So y'all may know the name Mark Bowe if you watch HGTV or, he's the Barnwood builder. He has his own show. I mean, he's a famous guy now, but he was a heck of a football player in his time. 92, we had a bunch of sophomores came up that dominated. Bobby Howard, Sam Singleton, Jonathan Riffle. We had a guy named Randy Moss. He ended up having a pretty good career. But they rolled through, won the title that year, And the game that I remember was Capital. We were down 17-0 at halftime down here, and Capital had beaten us during the regular season. And they came back and won 33-17, scored 5 touchdowns in the second half. Had a big tight end, Billy Gilmore, caught a couple long touchdowns there. And I remember Randy did a reverse. We were down 17-14 at the time. We were still down, but it was a reverse pass. He came around. He was looking for somebody to throw it, and he went. And it was electric. But the memories of seeing those guys play was amazing. And I never saw Jerry West play in high school. I didn't see Mike D'Antoni play in high school. I didn't see Hal Greer play in high school. I will say till the day I die, Jason Williams was a great player. Greg Bell was a great player. Randy Moss is the greatest high school basketball player I've ever seen in this state, period. I mean, it's just what he was able to do on a basketball court. If he would have chose to go that route, I have no doubt he would have been successful. But in football, I know Jerry Rice had more touchdowns. People say he's the second greatest receiver of all time. If he had Joe Montana for 7 years and Steve Young for 8, I think his numbers would have been a little different. So, amazing career. Really proud of what he's done, what he's doing now on television. But those championships went down. It was a big part of our history. But what people don't remember is, you looking back at it, we probably had a couple teams that were better overall teams that came after that in 97 and 98. 97, we're a AA size school, and we got beat in the semis up at North Marion, 24-19. Had Tremaine Strotter, Melvin Smith, some of those linemen that we've had up here with Jonathan Westfall, Griffith. I mean, it was an amazing line. 98, last year of the school, ran the table. We thought we were going to run out. We got beat by Weir with Quincy Wilson up there. And that was, again, Coach Whitman just had an amazing run all through the 90s there. But we ended up not getting a title that last year. The school, it consolidated into Riverside. And those first 3 or 4 years of Riverside, we were in the semis or the finals. And I tell you what, East Bank, I think, that was a lot of East Bank guys those first couple years, a lot of DuPont a couple years there. I think that, I wish Riverside could have pulled it off a couple of times. They came close. They had Parkersburg down that first year. But, we're, it's coming back. It's coming back. It's all, that's why I don't want to talk about the culture, but the eastern end of the valley, there's no Cedar Grove, there's no DuPont, there's no East Bank now. but I got a couple nephews back here that play at Riverside right now. I think, in time, we can get that back. We can get that back. I want to talk about that's the way the history unfolded. That's the way, and it ended. And there's not an East Bank, there's not a DuPont, but we have our culture, our side of the county. And I want to talk about just pride with the eastern end of the valley. We got some differing stories here about the St. Louis Blues and the significance of the march, and where, kind of like that's where we were together with East Bank and Cedar Grove and everybody on the eastern end. The Majorette Festival was a phenomenal event in the history of this county. And again, it was just like those football games. At Old Lately Field, you could not get a ticket for it. You could not get a ticket for it. It was like an event, football practice shut down early. Tammy, what was that like?
That was like every girl's dream was to be there on that field.
Yeah.
And the bands were huge. There was 100+ members in the band, and the band was as excited about it as the majorettes were. We practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and every step had to be perfect. And when you won, which we did,
I like it.
you paraded through the town of Bell, and you didn't care who you woke up because they were as excited as we were. And it was just, and I can remember when I was a kid getting woke up by when they won, when the older kids won the Majorette Festival, and you could hear the parade coming through Bell, and you knew they won. And I lived on 6th Street in Bell, closer to the river, but when you could hear those drums further down the street, you got up and you ran to the end of the street because you knew they won. And you didn't know what they won, but you knew they won something because the parade was coming through town. And then when I got there, and I was in the band, and we won, and you're marching through Bell, nothing like it.
Nothing like it. I was trying to explain this phenomenon to Mickey when we were driving down, because he was acting like what the Majorette Festival was. I said, I can't explain it. It was electric. Like the whole county literally shut down.
Well, that was when there was punch cards, IBM punch cards, and we had bags full of the things that had been punched to use as confetti. And that's when women had teased up hairdos, and they knew not to sit in front of you if you had a bag of those things that had been punched, because they knew that DuPont was going to win. Don't sit in front of the DuPont people because you're going to have those IBM punch card things in your teased up hairdo.
Well, Rob wrote a piece in the beginning of it talking about the sights and the sounds and just the smells. And the football games, when it was played at the old junior high, when you could hear the band room was up there on the 3rd floor, and you could hear them drums starting and coming through the building and coming out. I mean, it gives me chills to think about it. Remember?
Well, at DuPont High School, we had, in the 70s, we had the drum line, and we had that cadence, the drum cadence. That's right. You could hear us coming before, and that gives me chills because we had, we had that thing called the chair, but we had that cadence, and I'm sure that got the football team fired up while we were out on the field.
You could hear it coming, yeah.
You could hear us coming, and it was just, it was like that show Friday Night Lights, because we were out on the field but doing our pregame thing, and they were in the locker room hearing all the cheers and it was a phenomenon. It was just. And
down at the new high school, the band room was far. You'd come through the parking lot, you'd be down far. You could hear them coming from a distance.
We marched all the way up the parking lot.
Yeah. And then we had the cannon would go off, after touchdowns and after wins, and they brought that back here. The significance, and you've done the St. Louis Blues March many times, and we're going back to this. This was when Sue was in high school, I believe, when this happened. You were a cheerleader, but the bands, the marquee bands of the 50s. We had a very good one. We had a very good one. I'm going back to, again, I say Coach Douglas was a music guy, and it was real important to him that our band and the music at the school, just like Corky was a music guy. Corky was a music guy too. He was all about vibrant and having the show. He was all about, but Charleston High, Stonewall, St. Albans as well, had always won everything, 40s and 50s, anything band related. We might get a Kanawha majorette occasionally, but anything band related, one of those schools won it. It was a city school dominated deal. And I believe it was 53 or 54 festival, maybe 53, but we came with the St. Louis Blues. Mad Dog, you were a majorette at Richwood, so you can appreciate it. But this was a big deal, and we won. We finally won for best march. My mom, and Cindy, but you know how our mom was. She had the tally, and she would do the scoring and grand champion, and and that was a big deal in the predictions. But that year we won, and that was just massive celebration on the DuPont side. Everybody that was there, and they said it was so festive. Charleston High and Stonewall levied a protest saying that the St. Louis Blues was not an actual march. It wasn't a march. And it was upheld. They took it from us. They took it. And like, with Carson, was that the band director? It was ready to fight. Like, they said he was livid. And, our people were angry, because this was like 20 years coming, and they took it from us. And from that point on, it wasn't the St. Louis Blues victory, it was the march. After our games, we have a victory march. Our field show before the game was the St. Louis Blues march. And it was, and that was like celebrated. That's where East Bank had our back on that, because that became an anthem of our folks kind of flipping off the city schools. That was our defiance song, and after every victory, they come up, the cheerleaders be out there with the majorettes and be part of that march, and I'll tell you why. I remember as a player, Rob experienced this, Rick experienced it. When you're coming up and you're in the locker room and you're hearing that march and all the festive, there's no feeling like it. There's no feeling like it, and what it symbolized, that kind of pride in our end and our culture. So, and I know you went to a city school, but some of y'all back here did too. But that was the story behind the St. Louis Blues and the significance there. And what I was going to say, another thing culture-wise, and this is gonna, what the Rand University documentary, and what was pointing was how many athletes we've had that, we were told you're just going to go to Rand University up Camel's Creek, Point Lick, all the folks that came through the ball field up there as youth. Many of us were told you're just going to end up at Putney Tech. We had Putney Tech, Rand had Rand University, and basically it's kind of a shot saying you're not going to do anything beyond this. This is where your life's going to go. You're going to end up, and they would point to folks that in the documentary it talked about a lot of the former DuPont students, not just athletes, that would end up at the 7-Eleven drinking beer, smoking dope. And a lot of folks, my parents would point to up Camel's Creek, say that gang right there, they would go all the way up to Putney. It was an old abandoned coal camp at the head of the holler, and be sitting on their tailgate drinking beer and smoking dope. And that's, and the truth side to that is that there are a lot of athletes and a lot of folks we had that had an amazing time in the spotlight and didn't really get to take it on. And that was one of the things I really wanted to capture in this book, because there's some people that made a lot of magic. Either they went on and did some things or they didn't. But for that moment that they were wearing that blue and gold, they brought some magic to our community. And I wanted to capture that in this book, Above and Beyond. I wanted to capture that. And that was, what I hope I did and hope I got. And, I'm open for questions. Any additional testimony?
You covered it.
I wanted to tell the story as it was. Sue, anything that I wanted to do your dad justice because I mean it was his creation.
The book was amazing, and you've told it amazingly, and I thank you for all of it.
You know, I lived near Oceana after your dad, and they became a power in everything
Yes.
for a long time down there in the 60s. You didn't have better basketball than that county. Between Mullins, Oceana, Pineville, and Oceana was a power in football too. One of the all-time great athletes, the white Randy Moss, came out of there. Joe Pendry,
Yeah.
who's been a phenomenal coach for many years. And what your dad did there, you know, that continued long after that, even though he was only there a short time. That became one of the great athletic communities in the state.
Yeah. And Pennington's son was Chad, who went on to the NFL, played out of Oceana. Yeah.
Jesse, one more thing I might add. My dad's brother, Raymond Douglas, Mose was his nickname, graduated from Davis and Elkins in 1927. He went to Moorfield and started sports at Moorfield High School.
Yeah, and was head coach there for many years.
Yes, for 4 years, and then moved on. They both felt like it was important for young men to have something to do to stay in school.
Well, I'd say I want to, like I said, Frank Gardenia here was the voice of Penn State and Marshall for many years. Proud of one of our proud alums here. Very proud of everything that he has done. His son Gabe was the all-time leading kicker at DuPont. Had 77 kick scoring points in 1 year and played at Alabama. Played for the Crimson Tide and is now the head coach at Albany State. Correct? First year as head coach. And
Yeah, I'm not sure that's exactly a great thing, but
he's getting them going there. But he was a kicker at DuPont, but he was a holder for the Crimson Tide. So he was down there. And but I also want to call all my athletes that made the trip down. Some of my ladies came down here. Got Colin Wallace from Virginia, Marshall Sharp is the Capitol High guy, Sean Snyder from Boonesboro, Maryland. Got Michaela Peterson, she's from inside the Beltway up at Bethesda. Madison Frame is from Richwood. Brittany Green, she's from Hurricane, and Madison Kelball from Summersville here. They came some long distances, and these two over. Julia Yoakum, I didn't hide her. Cameron High School up there. And I wanted again, my daughter. I wanted to thank her for the work, and her husband Darren did a tremendous amount of work as far as getting this here. Helped me get it to the publisher, to Lundy Bailey up at Richwood, and my granddaughter. Marcy, she's been phenomenal in behaving while I spoke here. I wanted to give a shout out to my nephews here, Jacob and Tanner. They both are on the Riverside High team right now, and they've heard all these stories of what DuPont was like. And they had DuPont have won all these middle school championships, and while a lot of their teammates would go to Capital or GW or some other schools, they have embraced what the culture of that end of the valley is like, and have really done everything in their power to try to get that get this thing turned around and get it to as it was, and get our end back in the playoffs. So I'm really proud of what they're doing there with that. And again, Todd, thank you for making the trip down. Everyone, I can't say enough, for Rob and Tammy and Jim and Sue what they have done. It's just.
Jesse, one thought on the Majorette Festival, and Rob and Tammy probably know better than I, but in those days when we were in school, all the schools, their bands were pretty big, and it's not like today where the bands are pretty small. I mean, Sissonville, St. Albans, Herbert Hoover, everybody had big bands except Dunbar. And I was in school with some kids from the Dunbar band. They always said the Majorette Festival was their most embarrassing night of the year because they were always they really struggled. But those competition was not easy.
Yeah.
It was not a given just to go through that because a lot of the bands were really big at that time.
Well, that week leading up to that festival, I mean, the band they were like rock stars at the school. I mean, I remember Anthony Walker was our twirler, and the male twirler, and we had the majorettes. Like, man, we got some pretty girls. Maybe we'll get that Kanawha majorette this year. And we had Shannon Snodgrass and Karen Persinger while I was there. And That was it was an unbelievable event. I mean, that could be another story into itself at one of these sessions one day, but it was a big part of the county.
All right, I want to hear some dad stories.
Your dad would be, he would get up in your face yelling at me, and the tobacco would be, you know, I just have to sit there and take it, you know. Yeah, Jesse, you know. But Rob probably is on the wrong end of some of those too. Now, I will say, you know, Corky turned him loose. Like he would try to, you know, would have a hand in a lot of things, but he really let Skid do his thing with the scheme. We played the wide tackle 6, which he didn't throw a lot then. So I was a corner in the wide tackle 6. You're out there by yourself. I mean, you're by yourself. But, you know, what your dad and Corky, you know, when we played a team and had 3 back, you know, I'm getting schematic here. But there was a game, we went 9 in the box, which was a big risk. You were just daring them to throw it. And it was a blast. But they were cutting edge like that. They were all about flying to the ball, hitting people, no mercy, you know. And you know, your dad was a big star at Glenville. Had played at Raynell, right? Played at Raynell, coached at Frankfort High up in Greenbrier County, Frankfort, yeah, before he came and got hooked up with Coach Balsey. But
I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, Coach Skidmore, the year that we went to the States in '73. You know, the newspaper came every day to do something on some of the players. You know, it was either the offense, the defense, or whatever. So the defense was the team of the day for the newspaper article. And we had 2 guys, Doug Newsom and Charlie Tucker, which at that time they would have probably gone about 230, which was huge for DuPont athletes at that time. And I remember them doing a picture of Coach Skidmore holding one on each arm, sitting on his arms, and he was supporting them, holding them up for the photograph.
wow.
I mean, he was a brute of a man.
I believe that.
I also remember a story about one of his sons, and I'm not sure which one, knocking the car out of gear and backing it out into the boulevard.
It was the same one Kid Solo.
And my dad hit it.
Really?
Yes.
Do you know who was 2 cars behind that? Mr. Snodgrass.
Wow.
Well, that would have been you.
It was me.
Were you a twin?
No, I'm not twin.
But it was an amazing time. I feel real special for what we were a part of. And I think it needs to be celebrated. I brought a bunch of the books down here, like if anybody is interested in them. I'm not a salesman. I have a hard time asking for money and this and that. People say, well, you recruit. Well, that's different because when you're recruiting, I'm giving money. That's a little different. Yeah, but I brought a bunch of them down here. If you're interested, we got. Got Jack Holmes, the famous picture there on the front, but we got, there's Coach Skidmore on the back right there, and some of the coaching staffs, but yearbook style, and I'm working on doing one for the basketball right now that we're working on, and you're helping me with that there. So, I think hopefully by the next teammate dinner breakfast we'll have that. What's that? You want to say something, Mickey?
Oh no, Marceline is Marceline's talking. She's having her say over here.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so proud of my daughter. So proud of my daughter. She's kept the baby good here, Jim. But what have you heard about the DuPont stories? Tell me.
I've heard them all. I always talk about it.
Heard them all many times, she said.
Lots of times. I get to hear a lot and meet lots of cool people from it. I've got to go on lots of trips with you, and I've really we've had a good time learning everything. Darren was really into it. I'm sorry that he couldn't come. He really wanted to be here because he put a lot of work into it with you. He really liked going and looking through all the yearbook pictures and finding out things and hearing all the stories with me. So I had a lot of fun doing it.
Jesse, I want to thank you personally for your dedication to, our history, our memories. I mean, I don't think people really know how much work you put in. And, Jesse would call me up one day and he'd go, hey, I've got some stuff together. I'd like for you to look at it with me. And I was like, well, why would you want me to look at it with you? But sure. He goes, let's meet at Tim Hortons in
Panera.
Panera Bread in Taze Valley, you know. So he drives down. We meet at 7 o'clock on a school night, work night. And he brings out this stuff, and he's got like 12 spiral notebooks with handwritten notes where he had been to the archives, to the newspaper archives, writing down stats. And I was like, Jesse, how do you find time to do all this? But, I mean, he put in a lot of work, a lot of effort. He said he would probably have to have a second adder to it because he was sure once he got it published, even though he asked people for input all along, that he would get a lot of input saying,
Yep.
oh, you forgot this guy, you know, this wasn't the right name, it was a different guy. But thank you, buddy.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It was nice.
And I value our
I know
friendship.
God enjoyed it.
Same here, and I appreciate it. Just I don't know, the bond, the friendships that we have, can't put a price tag on it. It means the world to have here. I'm glad that my kids from school were able to come down and see it, because and I will say this, what we learned at DuPont, the togetherness, you know, how we try to bring everybody together from different backgrounds and to have a family. What we preach every day, what you all have every day at practice, it came from these folks right here that's in this room. That's where it came from.
There's a special camaraderie that between DuPont people, that you talk to people from St. Albans, or it's just different. I have friends from St. Albans that they don't even have an all-class reunion. They don't know people from other classes. It's just different. I don't know what it is, but it is, like you say, it is like a family. And you know, I know the Chases, you know, they weren't even close to me. They didn't live close to me, but you know, it's like a family. Another way to describe it. And when I was a little girl, I went to the Majorette Festival, you know, not just because it's what you did, you know, it was,
Just like Friday night football.
Yeah.
if you could get a ticket, that's right.
Yeah.
When people were parked in Rand along Route 60 walking to the football games, that tells you
Yeah.
what community was like in our town.
Yeah, well, Frank and I talked about this. It was the same thing when you went to Malden, and I was at Valley Grove, was that Friday, you go to school, that's all you're thinking about. The game that night. You couldn't wait for school to end and to be there. You know, it was, could not beat it. Could not beat it.
Jesse, I've had a lot of fun with the book too, showing it off to people from other schools. My college roommates, a couple of them went to Charleston High during their glory years of state championships. And I'll show them that book, and they asked me to speak at their reunions all the time. I didn't go there, I don't know. I take that book and say, it's a shame you guys didn't go to a real football school. So, if you did, you might have a book like this.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with the book.
I like it.
And we are going to have the breakfast again on December 23rd. For the people that don't know what that is, we started having a teammate breakfast and getting a bunch of the guys, it's kind of guys' day, together at the school. We'll have somewhere between 180 and 220 people show up. All different years, all different sports. This year, the newspaper wants to do a feature article during the breakfast that day, so.
Are the bratty coaches' kids welcome too?
Sure.
Absolutely. Well, tell you what, like I said, I appreciate you having me. We have a 6 o'clock practice tomorrow morning, right? we do. So, but that's why I just want to hug them. Thank you all so much for coming. It means the world what you do. So thank you all.